So this morning, I have a brief personal note, and then I'll talk about the Cove. This morning I'm going to really focus on the outcomes that we have at the Cove and just how we work towards achieving that. I have a brief kind of slightly academic moment in the middle, and then we'll get on to about helping and the ways that you all can serve and support us. I started working in a voluntary role in a soup kitchen in Edinburgh in 2003. That was my first kind of proper exposure to working with and caring for people experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity and all of the issues that go around that: addiction, mental ill health, poverty, etc. And why I started that was because I had a dream. One night I had a dream. I was with some friends walking through the Cowgate, which is a pretty well-known part of the Grass Market, which is a pretty well-known part of Edinburgh. And in my dream, I was leading this group of friends through, and we passed somebody who was begging on the streets. And I was eating, takeout pizza, as I was walking along, and he asked for some change and a slice of the pizza. And I was leading the group in laughing at him and deriding him. And we kind of walked on, and I dropped the pizza, and it falls face down onto the ground. And in my dream, lots of expletives. I would never use such language, of course. And I continued on, and I look round, and this man who was sat begging on the street had got up, come over to the dropped pizza, had picked it up off the ground and was eating it. And I continued to lead my group of friends in laughter and mocking him and all kinds of things. And I woke up, not quite in a cold sweat, but pretty disturbed by this dream. And that morning I was at our Christian Union prayer meeting, and we were in a group of three, and I said to the group of three, please can you pray for me, because I want to know if this is God is trying to tell me something here. And so we prayed, and at the end of the meeting, one of the other two people said, actually, I'm going to training today at this soup kitchen here in Edinburgh about homelessness and mental health. Why don't you come? And so I did, and there began my 17, 18, 19 years of work in and around homelessness. Both frontline delivery, commissioning homelessness services for the City of Edinburgh, public reform projects, a doctorate, now serving as the Executive Director at the Cove. So, very brief personal note on that. And my doctorate is actually on youth homelessness and the transition to adulthood. So I'm kind of in the perfect spot, which is great. What I'm going to talk this morning is about this idea of building stability, hope and connection for youth experiencing homelessness. The Cove started in 2016. The work to get the Cove started in about 2013. And it started with one of the homeless liaison officers in Waco ISD. Her name's Dr. Cheryl Pooler, and then Dr. Kathy Wigtill, who's the now homeless liaison officer there, and a group of people who said, we have these teenage youth coming to us saying that they have nowhere safe to live. They don't have enough clothes, they don't have enough food, they don't have enough money, and a good number of them are by themselves. There's no parent or guardian present to help them with those decisions. And they said, what can we do about this? And so they started with this idea of an after-school program in Waco ISD where youth could go, they could meet with a trusted, relatable adult, they could receive the support that they need, they could receive support to access housing, emergency housing, and they could get help with their learning. So one of the big programs that the Cove has in our after-school program is attendance recovery. So if youth spend an hour with us, they can get up to 3 hours back of attendance. And as we'll get on to, one of the main reasons why youth experiencing homelessness don't graduate is because they don't have enough attendance credits. Last year, so in 2022, the Cove for our youth helped recover almost 6,000 hours of attendance. So it started in Waco ISD, it started as an after-school program, and now jumping forward, we're working in Waco ISD, La Vega, and Midway ISDs. We have an after-school program Monday through Thursday. The youth get there by school bus predominantly, or we go and pick them up, and then we take them back at the end of the evening to wherever they're staying. We do school-based outreach 5 days a week, that's out on campuses, meeting one-to-one with youth. Often they're introductory meetings and building a relationship with the youth. But some of our youth don't want to come to a group setting. or they have band, or they have to work, or they have to care for younger siblings after school. And we're also a drop-in service as well. So Monday through Friday, 9 in the morning till 8 p.m, Monday through Thursday, 9 till 5 on a Friday, youth can just show up. We have a shower, we have laundry facilities, we have hygiene items, we have food, we have all kinds of things that we can supply to them. So I've kind of front-loaded it with telling you the things that we do, because actually I want to talk more about why we do it and the difference that it makes for our youth. My colleagues in Edinburgh particularly would kind of got a bit sick of me saying, I'm not interested in the outputs, I want to know what the outcomes are. We can deliver 10,000 meals, that's fine, but what difference is that actually making? But how is that changing people's lives? And so my staff probably get a little frustrated. What's the difference? How do we measure what the actual outcome is? And we have 3 outcomes. Sorry, I should have accelerated the slide. Welcome to the Cove. Our first outcome is stability. And what we want for our youth primarily is housing stability. If you want to develop in your life, if you want to have certainty and assurance and confidence and the ability to build other parts of your life, you need somewhere safe and stable. You need a home. In homelessness literature, there's this idea of, it's called ontological security. And if you've heard about the idea of housing first, this idea that the starting point of intervening on something like homelessness is to give somebody a home that is theirs, builds their capacity to deal with all of the other stuff in their life. They have this ontological security. And so what we want for our youth is that they have somewhere safe and stable to go every night. Unfortunately, home is not necessarily... I got my slides out of order. There we go, home. Home is perhaps not the place where that stability is possible. They may not have a home to go to. A number of our youth are living in cars, or they're doubled up with other families, or they're bouncing between a family members and a friends. Some of our youth are staying in the Family Abuse Centre, or a Methodist Children's Home, or Chase House, which is a project for under 18s in the south of the city run by Behavioural Health Network. Behavioural Health Network was MHMR. They just changed their name last May. So we want them to have stability in their home environment. And one of the big challenges we have at the moment is when they hit 18, what does that look like? We all know or have come across some of the challenges around housing in Waco at the moment. And for this group of youth, that is a really significant problem. And so we work with Behavioural Health Network, our partners. They have a project based out of the Dobie Centre on Austin, and they provide kind of rental assistance and rapid rehousing and transition programs for 18 plus and youth who are kind of exiting school. Jumping back, a lot of the literature around development and personal development is that you need stability in order to have positive and effective developmental processes. So delays in this idea of stability, whilst you're particularly going through that transition to adulthood phase, contributes to delayed developmental processes. There's literature now that shows that it affects people's working memory, the experience of homelessness, and that lack of security. And so we want a stable home, but we also provide and want our youth to have access to the things that they need. So I put up the food pantry here, that's just one thing. A lot of our youth just don't have a regular supply of good quality, I mean, maybe some of those aren't quality, but good, easily prepared food and not missing meals. So we talk about stability a lot, and it's one of the reasons for our volunteers why we ask volunteers to commit an evening a week for a semester. And each semester we do a mix of new volunteers and returning volunteers, partly because people's circumstances change and they need to not volunteer once a week for a semester, or there's another kind of thing that they want to commit their time to. And that's fine, that's life, but we try and make sure that there's a consistent kind of group of people that can build the relationships with the youth, like Jim was just saying at the start. Our second outcome that we talk about is this idea of hope. If you will, imagine this idea, and I don't know what all of your backgrounds are, in a room this size, of this number of people, there's probably a few people who've had, the probability is that somebody here would have had either experienced homelessness or had some sort of housing instability in their life. And so we talk about hope, and again, it's particularly for the youth that we're serving. The graduating high school kind of milestone barrier looms large in their minds. I mean, for those who have high school aged youth, it's quite a challenging mindset and quite a challenging stage of life. But if you're also experiencing homelessness at the same time, this idea of what's next when you're living day to day is a really big challenge. And so we want to give our youth hope. Primarily, we talk about hope in employment, hope in education, and hope in employment, and in their kind of economic activities later. So I talked about attendance recovery. We have paid tutors that come and work with our youth. We actually have access to the school system, so we can go and see students' academic records, and we can say, hey, you missed these assignments. Why don't we work on those assignments and get them completed so you can get your credits? We also have started working with some of our post-high school partners. So this last summer, we had a partnership that we just started with TSTC, and they're providing supported applications and scholarship applications for our youth. We currently have 2 of our previous year's worth of seniors who are out at TSTC, and we've got 2 at MCC. So one of the things that we're doing this year in 2023 is thinking about how do we help our youth after they graduate high school. So let's get them to graduating high school. 16 of our 19 seniors graduated last year, which is really great. But what's next? Where are they going after that? And partners like TSTC and McLennan Community College are providing some of that. But widely, we want our youth to try and just capture a future for themselves, to see beyond their current circumstances. So TSDC and those programs are great, but the work to get somebody to that point starts a year, 2 years beforehand. And so we have a whole range of programs, and we have a book club, and we have a nurture group, we have a nutrition group. We do workouts, we do art programs, we do visits to the Mayborn and to the zoo and to wherever else will get us in at low cost and will be a benefit. So our book club is one of the things that people really enjoy, and we have the Advocacy Centre. I don't know if some of you are familiar with that, just off MacArthur and Pine. And they come and run the book group for us. So this idea of hope, it's a really challenging one, and particular, this last fall semester has been really challenging in the high schools. The number of fights that have been happening, the pressures on the teachers, the false alarm active shooter earlier in September. A lot of the time our youth are coming like really wound up. We had our Christmas party in December, and we had about 30 youth signed up, and in the end only about 20 showed up, and a whole bunch of the students from one of the high schools couldn't come because of fights that happened at the end of the day that just put the whole bus schedule off, and they were just so wound up in their minds that they just couldn't quite face come in. So we want to help our youth see beyond that. That's one of the things. And the last thing we talk about is connection. This is some art work going on. I think that was from the summer program last year. Like we've talked about already, the relationship with volunteers and with staff and with each other is a really key part. If people are familiar with the ideas around developmental psychology, and there's this way of thinking called psychologically informed environments. It's all very grand sounding, but it basically means that people need relationships in order to thrive. And what we try and do at the Cove is create environments where our youth can experience positive relationships. Sometimes that means dealing with some tough stuff and difficult relationships that happened, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And we also talk about, as part of that connection and well-being, is the external thing, but there's also an internal kind of just well-being and positive sense of self, both physically and mentally and social, emotionally. So we run a HIT program, and students from Baylor come and do workouts with the youth. That's a really grainy photo, but it was the one I had access to. It's really amazing to see how positive the engagement with those physical activities are. You know, and we try and think about, not all youth are particularly athletically minded, and so we always have alternatives, and that might just be walking up and down the parking lots together and just getting everybody's bodies moving and getting some blood flowing. And we do it at the start of the evening. It's the best time to do it because it helps them transition from the busyness of school day and bus ride into thinking about getting on with some homework and engaging with the program that we have. And then just on that social emotional kind of health, we talk a lot about what's happening in our society. This is a slide from a work we did about stereotyping, and just helping our youth think about, who are they in the world. A lot of our youth have experienced trauma. They've experienced domestic abuse. They have questions and struggles and issues around their sexuality and gender identity. They are several of the youth that we've had this current year have been on the edges and skirting around gang violence and organised crime. And a lot of the questions that come around this is because they need help to regulate and think about who they are in the world. And so we try and provide that for them. Okay, so stability, hope, and connection. That's what we're trying to do at the Cove, and it's a really key part of who we are. Why do we do it? Because youth homelessness is a really difficult thing to fix. It's, I just put this quote up, there's designers sometimes have really good ways of articulating things, and so this idea that a wicked problem is a form of social or cultural problem that is difficult to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements. These problems are typically offloaded to policymakers and are written off as being too cumbersome to bother with. Yet these are the problems that plague our world and our cities. Poverty, sustainability, equality, and health and wellness are issues that touch each and every one of us. When we think about youth homelessness and young people, experiencing what they go through that leads up to them having to exit or leave the family home, there is a lot to think about in that, and it's difficult and it's hard. But why are we doing it? Appropriately, thank you, Martin Luther King Jr., who's tomorrow we're celebrating. This is from his speech at the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's in the context of both the violence around the civil rights movement and the struggle that they had there, but also the impending threat of thermonuclear destruction that was happening around that time. But he has a sentence in here that he says, which I think just, for me, really helps and encapsulates some of what we're trying to do. And he said, "I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education for their culture, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." Experiencing homelessness, if you're an adult or a young person, is hard. And just put up here some of the things that we hear about from the whole of the population of people who experience homelessness. Trauma, poverty, loss of control in their lives. So if you come for a tour at the Cove, one of the things I talk about is the loss of control, the loss of choice, and the loss of dignity that our young people experience because they often have to wear the same clothes several days, don't know if they're going to be able to get a shower today, not sure where their meal's going to come from. Just think about that for a moment, and these things kind of quite quickly pop up and seem evident. The violence that our youth have experienced and abuse that they've experienced. I don't know if anybody saw last week, a video came out from, I believe it was Los Angeles, of a gallery owner in the city hosing down a homeless woman outside his shop. and she was sat on the street begging, and he was just nonchalantly leaning against the fence, just hosing her down. And that is what, unfortunately, a lot of people's experience is. They're stigmatized and ostracized from society. For our young people, there's some specific other issues that they face. Stigma. I don't want people to know that I'm homeless. One of the biggest challenges we have at the Cove is identifying young people. We work with our school partners and others to try and do that better. I was in San Diego in November at a national conference around education of homeless children and youth. And everybody across the country is talking about this issue of how do we get to our youth who are experiencing homelessness. And so at the Cove, we're increasingly doing training, information sharing, being more vocal about what to look for and how to have good housing conversations with people. Hidden homelessness, they're not in encampments. Some of them are. All of our youth are not in encampments. They're often bouncing around, not talking about it. They're staying with a friend. They're in a car. But our youth are also, and I've touched on this already, are in this process of reaching adulthood. Their social, physical, emotional status in society is changing dramatically. This is my brief academic interlude. The causes of homelessness are multifactorial. Let's just leave it at that. But some of the data that we have in the UK, and this is for 18 to 25-year-olds, getting data for under 18s is generally hard, and we don't have a lot of good data. But for the 18 plus, if you don't have your high school diploma or GED, the risk factor is 346% times more likely. I'm expressing that wrong, but hopefully it's clear. You're more likely to experience homelessness if you don't have your high school diploma, which is why we do attendance recovery and why we celebrate our graduates. If you're in a household of less than $24,000 a year, you're more likely to experience homelessness. If you're a Hispanic non-white youth, you're more likely to. If you identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, you're a significantly higher likelihood of experiencing homelessness. If you're Black or African American youth, if you're an unmarried parent youth. These are some of the risk factors that we look out for in society. And so when we go out to schools and talk to people, we ask about these kinds of things. And we ask about sudden drops in attendance, or sudden changes of behavior, or sudden changes in personal hygiene. These can all be indicators that a youth might be experiencing housing instability or homelessness. Okay, scale of youth homelessness. Went too far. Again, difficult to get numbers, but they reckon that there's between 1 and 1.7 million youth each year that experience homelessness in the US. In Texas, again, data is kind of hard to get, but in 2019-2020 school year, 111,000, just over that, were coded by the school districts as being homeless. It's going to be more than that because, unfortunately, school reporting does miss people. And then there's just a breakdown in that. In the kind of heart of Texas region, in the 2019 point in time count, they identified just under 700 high school aged youth who are experiencing homelessness. So it's a prevalent issue, and it's hard to get to them, as I was talking about a moment ago. But when we get to them, we have a really good offer for them and a really good program for them to help them move on in their lives and to thrive into adulthood by building stability, hope, and connection. In terms of the Cove's work, just kind of a little chart. Yellow and grey is 2021, blue and orange is 2022. This is pretty significant growth this year that we've served. In Waco ISD, at the beginning of November, there was just over 700 pre-K through 12 children, young people that are being coded as homeless. So we're growing and we're seeing a lot more young people, but there's a lot more work needed to be done. And this year we're hoping to formalize partnerships with China Spring and with Connolly ISDs as well. So we're going to keep growing and we're going to keep finding and serving the youth as best as we can with the resources that we have. Again, just some more of the stuff that we've done. Just under 1,900 contacts with youth, 1,371 rides, and that's back to where they're staying. That's an ID appointment. That's just taking them to school in the start or the middle of the day or whenever it is. like I said, almost 6,000 hours of school attendance hours, almost 1,000 meals served, hygiene items, food items, clothing vouchers. And 16 out of the 19 seniors that we worked with last school year graduated. One of them has now subsequently graduated, and 2 of them we lost contact with, believe they went out of state. So it's kind of hard to keep track of them when they do that. And these numbers keep growing up. In the 2021-2022 school year, it was like just under 3,600 hours of school attendance we recovered. So for anybody who likes maths, that basically means our fall semester has been really, really busy. And it has been really, really busy. We're seeing, on average, it's like 12 and a half youth an evening, but it's as many as 20 in a single evening. And different youth come on different evenings, so it's kind of fun to program for that because we're never entirely sure who's going to show up. Plans for this coming year, expansion to new school districts, like I just mentioned about, Trent Spring and Connolly. And we're going to be introducing a new role later in this year, and this is the role of family advocates, and this will be staff dedicated to working with the parents and guardians of our youth. And our intention is that these members of staff will have formal mediation training in homelessness literature and evaluations. Family mediation is one of the most effective ways of resolving youth homelessness, partly because families just don't have, there's struggles for the parents, there's struggles for the youth, they're pressured by income and socioeconomic, by housing, by landlords, by maybe their past. And what we want to try and create is a place where our youth and their parents or guardians can actually have supported, meaningful conversations and try and work a way forwards for them. In the UK, there's a program called Family Group Decision Making, and it's a process that's kind of, it's similar lines, but it's a way of just getting the family members together and saying, how can we make decisions with one another that don't resolve in us yelling at each other and you getting kicked out again? In this instant, can be applied to any other kind of issue that's going on. I already mentioned post-secondary opportunities and then partnerships. And the partnerships with St Albans and the other churches and civic organisations here is a really integral and key part of us being able to do what we do. Working with the Advocacy Centre, working with the school districts, working with other non-profits in the city, we've got a grant from Baylor Scott and White Healthcare to do a food insecurity and healthy eating programme this semester. We have a really big corporate sponsorship programme. I can't remember the exact figure, but it was close to $150,000 we raised last year from corporate sponsorships. Magnolia were actually a very big part of that, which is nice. Okay, what can you all do to help us? The obvious one, and I don't know if I was allowed to ask for money, but we do need money to run the program. We need to pay the staff, and we need to pay for our gas and electricity, and we need to pay for fuel for our vehicles. And some of you may have seen we had we're fundraising for a new van. Our very old Ford Ecoline is falling apart. So there is a financial need, which is kind of obvious, but have to ask sometimes. Volunteering, as we've mentioned, as Jim and Cindy and others around St Albans know about, we recruit each semester. There is a form on our website that you can fill out. Even if you're vaguely interested and just want to have a conversation about it, fill out the form, and Tara, who coordinates and recruits our volunteers, will bring you in, have a conversation, show you around, talk about what we do. We ask for a commitment of 1 evening a week for a semester. And like I said, that's a really key ask because we want to be able to build up relationships. And as Jim helpfully mentioned earlier, it takes a few weeks sometimes to do that. It takes a few weeks for me as a staff member and having worked in the sector for a long time. We also do, through the year, have needs, in-kind donation needs. What I ask is that people get in touch with us before turning up with a whole bunch of stuff, because the needs change through the year, and what we don't want is 10,000 toothbrushes, but no body wash, so we actually had somebody turn up with a pallet of Gatorade, which was slightly hilarious, and we took a couple of crates. We also had somebody call and said, I've got some chicken from a manufacturer nearby, and it's good chicken, it's all great, but it just didn't quite meet their threshold for selling. And I said, oh, how much do you have? 40,000 pounds worth of chicken. So we took 2 bags. Which was, Amazon said, we've got pallets of stuff, we can donate. We don't want pallets of stuff. And clothing, for example, we work with Things from the Heart, part of the Shepherd's Heart program. Youth, when they're referred there, get a voucher. Why we do that is, one is we just don't have the space or capacity to process clothing. And also, we want to give them choice. Mm-hmm. We want them to be able to go and choose. We had a donor at the end of the last year turn up with 20 $125 gift cards for Old Navy. That's brilliant, because they can go. They had so much fun going and choosing out the clothes. And so we do have it. Get in touch. It's usually better if groups, or if you have the capacity to do it individually, that's great as well. Okay, last slide. I've tried to really focus on why we do what we do, and to kind of disperse some of the stories and things that we do along the way. And what we want to communicate is this message of hope, that experiencing homelessness does not need to be an end for our youth as they progress towards adulthood and seek to have success in their schooling and in their lives. A lot of our youth go on actually to do pretty well, and that's wonderful. This is our mural for people who haven't seen it in our building. It was painted by 3 of our alumni. It's called A Message of Hope. And broadly it represents the student as the bird thriving, the cove as the rock and secure and safe place. And then you can just see them, these 3 puzzle pieces, trails of puzzle pieces, representing the fact that both there is trauma and brokenness in their life, but also that they're not a homogeneous black box of a person. There's different parts to who they are. They're creative, and they do have struggles. They have a caring side. And the puzzle piece is a theme that we use in other parts of the building. So on our thank you wall for our sponsors, each of the sponsors has a puzzle piece. Because it takes a whole village to make something like the Cove happen. So, on that note, thank you all for listening. I hope it's been helpful and insightful, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
I got a question. So, you mentioned to volunteer, what you're looking for is an evening a week for a semester. What is a typical evening consist of?
Oh, a typical evening, okay. So, youth get to the Cove somewhere between 4:30 and 5, and they have some downtime. At 5 o'clock, we have a community meeting, and that's just talking about what the program is for the evening. We do a thing called engine plates, and it's where everybody in the room, volunteers, staff, youth, we say, where are you, thinking about your kind of mind and your body in the colours of red, green, and blue. Are you wound up, angry, too much energy? Are you green, ready to work, feeling good? Are you blue? Are you feeling down, low, can't get off your seat? And then we go into a series of programs. There'll be the HIIT workout, it will be a meal, it will be the nurture group, it will be just whatever the program is. So the volunteers' roles there is to help the youth engage with the program. That's probably the simplest way to put it.
From a time perspective?
Oh, from just before 5 till just before 8, or ish.
5 to 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
What age groups? You talk about youth, so like what age?
14 to 18, 14. So high school.
And what do you do in the summer with these kids? Because then they're not going to school, so
sure.
The transportation thing has got to be a logistic nightmare.
We do daytime programming instead of evening programming, and we pick them up and we drop them off.
Okay.
Having been there a few months, I've had a few occasions to bring the gospel
Yep.
into a conversation or something, but what's the best way to do that? Is there a protocol?
Yeah, so the Cove is not affiliated like religiously, and actually because of our government funding, we can't be like explicit in that way.
Yeah.
The general approach in a lot of social services, and the approach that we take is, if a youth is interested in asking questions or asks why you're doing something, or like, why are you here? Why are you taking care of us? It is absolutely acceptable to explain that it's because of your faith and because of the difference that Christ has made. So I've had that multiple times through my career, and it's the general kind of guiding approach is, if the youth is interested or is asking you about why you do something, is totally okay to explain that.
Okay. I just didn't know what
Yeah.
the laws were.
Yeah, we have had groups come and say, can we come and volunteer? We want to do testimony nights and like do evangelism outreach. And it's like, no, you can't. Sorry. Yeah.
On a related topic, with the LGBTQ focus that you mentioned
Yeah.
a couple different times, that is something that comes up pretty frequently in the greater LGBTQ community, is
Yep.
how can we support youth?
Yep.
So is there anything specific from that community that can help that specific aspect
Yeah.
of the code?
So do you know Lucas Land?
Yes.
Yeah. So Lucas is a mutual acquaintance who is also very involved in the LGBTQ Pride work here in Waco, and something that we've talked about and something that we talk about as staff. And I think the identification is a really important part of that, because often youth who are in the LGBTQ plus community, their first point of contact or help is often like the Pride Network or a similar organisation. And so a lot of the work we do with the LGBTQ community and others is to just learn about, asking about, like, hey, where are you staying? Yeah. Like, do you feel safe there? Yeah. Like, do you have what you need, on a day-to-day basis? Like, how's school going? And so just asking questions like that and realising that the Cove is a resource for our youth. And, our staff team and our volunteer team is made up of a very diverse group of people, and so in Texas, actually it's a US figure, if a youth is identifies as being part of the LGBTQ plus community, they're 2.2 times more likely to experience homelessness than their peers. So, very relevant issue.
I do want to be sensitive to our time
Yes.
for those who are going to the service, but might you help me thank Tim?